It is extremely appropriate that we begin our ANZAC Day service by celebrating those that have served our country to give us hope and a future. On behalf of our principal, Mr. Brennan, and the St. Augustine's College family, I would like to welcome our special guest, Lieutenant Danielle Britton, Royal Australian Navy. I welcome Xavier Ray David Williams for the acknowledgement of country.
As Indigenous and non-Indigenous people gathering together, let us have a sense of importance of the country upon this celebration is being held, where the learning and ceremony have taken place over many thousands of years. Let us sense that the land beneath our feet and acknowledge to whom it belongs, the Gumiwal, Yidinji, and the Yurganji people. Let us pay our respects to the elders and all elders, past, present, and future, for we too are one in land, one in spirit, one in faith, united in God's love.
Many thanks, Xavier Ray, for the acknowledgement of country. Before I speak on the significance and meaning of ANZAC Day, I think it might be useful to play the ANZAC Day centennial video that was played here 4 years ago, so that we can reflect on the sacrifices made by past generations of servicemen and women.
The promise made, you live forever, eternal flame. And so we all remember them, lest we forget, lest we forget. Side by side, we say with pride.
week ago, we reflected and commemorated 104 years since Australian troops landed on the shores of Gallipoli during World War I. It is also a day where we pay tribute to the ANZAC spirit that has been forged over the last century. ANZAC Day is a solemn day for all Australians and New Zealanders. While the ANZAC spirit was born on the beaches and slopes of Gallipoli in the Dardanelles during the campaign of 1915, ANZAC Day has become our national day of remembrance for all wars and conflicts in which our nation has been involved. It is a day to remember those who have fallen in war so that we might live in freedom. It is a day to remember that our God continually calls us to work for justice and love. It is a day to celebrate the power of forgiveness. It is a day to be inspired by the courage of those, many of whom are nameless, who have given their lives for us. Today, therefore, it is not only a poignant reminder of the history of our nation, we commemorate and celebrate the actions of courage, dedication and sacrifice to all of those who have served in the Australian forces, from the original ANZACs of ANZAC Code to those involved in combat, peacekeeping, disaster relief and humanitarian efforts throughout our history. I now invite Year 10 student Lynn Lane to address the college.
ANZAC Day is one of the mysteries of the modern age. The mystery is how ANZAC Day continues to grow in the minds and hearts of the people of Australia and New Zealand, when in the 1970s and 80s it appeared to be diminishing in the national consciousness. Commentators were saying that it would be a very small affair indeed by the 21st century. The opposite is the case. The question is why? The reason that it seemed to be diminishing 40 to 50 years ago was that many of the diggers of World War I were still alive, and there were many of them. ANZAC Day seemed to be their day, a day of marches, gatherings, services, a few drinks, and a quiet game of two-up. We participated in it respectfully, but were not as much a part of what it was as the old diggers were. It seemed to belong to them. They now have all passed, and the day and what it means has passed from them to the nation to the people of all ages. It has captured our national imagination and our collective pride, and has become a unifying and inspiring day for people of all ages and cultures. The fact that we as a college community take time out to celebrate ANZAC Day is a small example of this. Secondary and primary schools all over Cairns, indeed all over Australia and New Zealand, do the same. The season of Easter just gone has the theme of no greater love. ANZAC Day can share the same theme, no greater love. May that love continue to grow in our hearts as individuals and as a nation, so that we can build a future on a firm foundation free of fear, hate and prejudice. May the example of Jesus and the men and women who gave their lives for us be an inspiration. Please stand in silence. Parade Commander, mount the guard.
Honorable party, mount guard.
Careful, party, slow march.
Please be seated. On this day, above all days, we remember those Australian men and women who died or suffered in the great tragedy of war. On the morning of April 25th, 1915, Australian and New Zealand troops landed under fire at Gallipoli, and it was then and in the violent campaign which followed that the ANZAC tradition was forged. The elements of that tradition have inspired and offered an enduring example to later generations of Australians. Each year, we pay homage not only to those original ANZACs, but to all who died or were disabled in their service to this country. They enrich our nation's history Their hope was for the freedom of mankind, and we remember with their pride, their courage, their compassion, and their comradeship. They served on land and sea and in the air in many places throughout the world. Not only do we honour the memory of those Australians who have fallen in battle, we share the sorrow of those who have mourned them and all of who have been the victims of armed conflict. On this day, we remember with sympathy those Australians who have suffered as prisoners of war and those who, because of war, have had their lives shortened or handicapped. May we and our successors prove worthy of their sacrifice.
I would now like to welcome to the lectern our guest speaker for today, Lieutenant Danielle Britton, Royal Australian Navy.
Mr. Brennan, teachers, staff, student, family and friends, it is an honour to be here today, and I thank you for asking me to speak to the school to commemorate ANZAC Day. ANZAC, originally not a word, it was a set of initials, where the initials stood for Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. In 1915, as part of World War I, those ANZAC men were sent to fight in the part of Turkey known as the Gallipoli Peninsula. It was because of the way in which those Australians and New Zealanders fought and the way they faced the hardships that the initials became a word, ANZAC. Today the word is very much respected, not just in Australia and New Zealand, but around the world. It was the ANZAC's endurance, courage and mateship that forged a spirit and legend that lives on today. It is this that we remember and honour on ANZAC Day, and it is these qualities that we talk about when we refer to the ANZAC spirit. But what does the ANZAC spirit mean, and what should it mean to you? It's a short word for a number of qualities which all of us, not just the members of the Australian Defence Force, can use in our everyday lives. Firstly, the ANZAC spirit represents endurance, never giving up. The original ANZACs knew what they had to do. They knew the dangers and the difficulties, but they got down and did not let the difficulties stop them. Secondly, the ANZAC spirit represents courage, being brave in everything you do and taking responsibility for your actions. It is easy to say, I did that, or that's my work when everything goes well, but we all know that sometimes things don't go well. Remember the ANZAC spirit and be courageous. Take responsibility for what you are doing. Finally, the ANZAC spirit also includes mateship. Now let me give you an example from Navy's history of a young sailor who paid with his life to save his mates. In 1942, an 18-year-old ordinary seaman, Edward Teddy Sheehan's job was to save his ship, HMAS Armidale, by shooting down attacking Japanese aircraft. He trained hard and he took his duties very seriously indeed. He was a quiet Tasmanian, described as the kind of boy who would do anything for his mates. Teddy's ship, Armidale, came under air attack in the Timor Sea and was hit by torpedoes and bombs. With his ship in flames and sinking, the captain ordered abandon ship. Teddy Sheehan saw his friends being hit by machine gun pellets from the aircraft, but it was his duty to destroy. So he must have decided in that moment that he cared more for his mates and for his duty than he did for his own life. For instead of abandoning ship, Teddy scrambled back through the gunfire to his anti-aircraft gun and opened fire at the attacking aircraft. He certainly shot down one and possibly two and damaged two others. Even after being shot, he kept firing back, causing aircraft to fly away from the ship and away from his comrades in the water. His selfless action saved many shipmates' lives. As Armidale took her final plunge, witnesses saw an arc of bullets going up from Teddy's gun as the hot barrel hissed into the water. But he did not die thinking of fame. He gave his life for his friends, and we honour him for his selfless courage. But what does the example of Teddy Sheehan, the boy who would and did do anything for his mates, teach young Australians? The Navy honours him and has named a submarine after him. To use a modern phrase, perhaps what young Teddy teaches us all is, it's not all about me. That phrase provides one way of remembering our Anzacs. This, combined with our three characteristics of endurance, courage, and mateship, are what we mean when we talk about the Anzac spirit. Now, I hope that Australia will never be involved in another war and that you will never be called upon to experience such a terrible thing. But should you use these things I have talked about, a sense of purpose, acceptance of responsibility, and unselfishness, not only while here at school, but for whatever you may do in your lives. By doing this, you will be helping to make sure that the ANZAC spirit is an ongoing part of life in Australia. May they rest in peace, lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Thank you, Lieutenant Danielle Britton. Now I would like to invite Luke as a party to pay tribute to a St. Augustine's old boy, Bert Turner.
Ladies and gentlemen, it never ceases to amaze me how so much can be compacted into these three words, the ANZAC spirit. And I believe that is even more amazing. The young men, not much older than myself, forged this notion amongst the hellfire of the First World War. Valour, bravery, friendship, resilience are all synonyms with this ANZAC spirit that we so often talk about. And for me, this aurora, this spirit that exists, is like reaching up into the stars and grasping nothing but air. To me, it was a gold standard only attainable by the most distinguished of people. And this, my thought process for a while. That was until I learned of a former Saints boy, Bert Turner. Bert Turner was born in Cairns of parents Thomas and Charlotte Turner on the 9th of September 1916. Bert attended school at St. Augustine's from the 20th of February 1930 to the 10th of October 1933, and then secured employment with the Cairns Post and becoming a rotary machinist. Bert was very strong and athletic and excelled in numerous sports such as cricket, tennis, boxing, cycling and long-distance swimming. He was enlisted in the Army in Sydney on the 8th of July 1940 and was selected for specialised training in unarmed combat and demolition procedures. On the 24th of July 1941, Bert was a member of Z Force Commando Unit placed on Manus Island under the leadership of Lieutenant Palmer. The unit dug in and had control of the island for some months, until a convoy of Japanese ships unloaded approximately 15,000 personnel on the island. After several weeks of hiding from the Japanese, it became obvious that it would only be a matter of time before they were discovered. Lieutenant Palmer, who had battle-infected tinea on his feet and could not walk, devised a plan. On a night when visibility was low, Bert would place demolition charges in and around the Japanese camp. Lieutenant Palmer would be carried on the top of a hillside. A machine gun would be mounted near him. He would create a diversion and hold the Japanese off as long as he could until the unit escaped in a sampan, which he had concealed in a excluded spot on the coast. Shortly afterwards, the plan went ahead. Charges were placed and the Japanese camp was seriously damaged. However, contrary to his plan, Lieutenant Palmer was picked up and carried by his men, and all 25 made it to the sampan to attempt the dangerous 500-kilometre crossing of the Bismarck Sea to the mainland of New Guinea. At night, the group used to row and paddle, and in the day, they would swim, push and tow the sampan, whilst disguised as island fishermen. After several weeks, they landed on the mainland. As they were walking along the beach, a small monoplane circled low overhead and eventually landed on the beach nearby. The pilot of the plane, Australian missionary Catholic priest, Father Glover, had recognised the group from the air as Aussies and warned them that their present course would take them on to a large Japanese camp. Father Glover quickly turned back to the air. This was very strange or even miraculous happening to have priests drop out of the sky and warn them of impending danger. It took months to fight their way against enemy and the extreme conditions of the mountains of New Guinea. And when the unit eventually reached Army headquarters in Port Moresby, approximately 900 kilometres from Manus Island, there was a feeling of jubilation that they had made it against impossible odds. However, this was short-lived, as the officer of the day arrested the group on a charge of desertion and they were all imprisoned. Sometime later, an inquiry reversed the decision and Lieutenant Palmer received accommodation for their action. On the 22nd of May 1942, after 315 days of continuous active service, Bert was granted leave and returned to Cairns to visit his family and friends. On the 8th of November 1943, after serving a total of 1,219 days, Bert was discharged from further military service due to health reasons. Bert Turner died in Brisbane on the 22nd of April 1993, aged 77 years. Upon reading this awe-inspiring story of a person who was connected to me through my school, I began to realise that the ANZAC spirit isn't something that is to be achieved, but rather something that has already been won and ingrained in our Australian society through the achievements of those who came before us and those who have valiantly fought for hope, the hope of change, the hope of peace, the hope of a better future. And the fact that so many of us have gathered here this morning is a sign that hope still lives on, lest we forget.
Thank you for that moving tribute, Luke. We will now watch a visual tribute of ANZAC Day prepared by Lachlan Womersley and Old Boy Levi Vincent. This will then be followed by the St. Francis Peace Prayer led by our liturgy captain, Simeon Latouche.
It is my melancholy duty to inform you officially that in consequence of the persistence by Germany in her invasion of Poland, Great Britain has declared war upon her, and that as a result, Australia is also at war.
Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, unity. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is error, truth. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is sadness, joy. Where there is darkness, light. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. Since it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born into eternal life. Amen.
I would now like to call on Reuben Porter and Lachlan Jensen to address the college and speak about Sir John Monash and the Battle of Lehigh.
Equip yourself for life, not solely for your own benefit, but for the benefit of the whole community. These empowering words spoken by Australian Army General Sir John Monash truly encapsulate the motivations behind his philosophy on life, to always strive to serve one another. Dubbed the most successful Army General in the history of the Royal Australian Infantry Corps, Monash has been largely idolised as a model citizen because of his hard work, determination and community service. Sir John Monash was born into a working-class immigrant family in Melbourne in 1865. In his youth, Monash attended Melbourne's prestigious Scotch College and was awarded Dux in 1881 at the age of 16. Rather than using his tremendous intellect and multitude of qualifications for personal gains, Sir John joined the Australian Army full-time in 1914 to assist with Australia's overseas war efforts. Sir John is most notable for commanding the first Australian troops to victory during the Battle of Lehigh in 1918. The American and British allies had been battling against the Germans for 6 weeks prior. Yet just 93 minutes after joining the efforts, Sir John and the Australian diggers had single-handedly completed all of the Allied objectives. During this famous Australian battle, rather astoundingly, 2 diggers were awarded the coveted Victoria Cross, clear evidence of the camaraderie, determination and grit that took place under the direction of Sir John Monash.
According to British historian A.J.P. Taylor, Monash was the only general of creative originality produced by the First World War. Monash's impact on Australian military thinking was significant in 3 areas. Firstly, he was the first Australian to fully command Australian forces independent of the British. Second, he promoted the concept of the commander's duty to ensure the safety and well-being of his troops. And finally, he forcefully demonstrated the benefit of thorough planning and integration of all forces available to an army. Troops later recounted that one of the most extraordinary things about the Battle of Hamel was not only the use of armoured tanks, nor the tremendous success of the operation, but the fact that in the midst of the battle, Monash had arranged the delivery of hot meals up to the front line, a prime example of his community-mindedness. On return to Australia, Monash completed studies at Melbourne University and attained several degrees in law, arts and a doctorate of engineering. With these, he continued to contribute greatly to Australian society, both academically and culturally, eventually becoming the Vice-Chancellor of Melbourne University from 1920 until his death in 1931. In recognition of his enduring influence, Sir John is the namesake of Monash University, and his face can be seen on our nation's $100 note. An accomplished scholar and war hero, Sir John left a significant cultural and militaristic legacy on this nation. This celebrated Australians' life and legacy teaches us all to keep community spirit, solidarity and compassion at the forefront of our lives. It is fitting that we commemorate Sir John Monash this ANZAC Day.
Over the next couple of minutes, we will honour those who humbly and with love and courage have died for freedom, justice and love. We will honour them first with the laying of the wreath, followed by the recitation of the Ode to the Fallen, then by the last post, then by silence, and finally raising our eyes to the flag during the reveille. Please stand in silence. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
A reading from the Gospel of St. John. I love you just as the Father loves me. Remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, that your joy may be complete. My commandment is this: to love one another as I have loved you. The greatest love that a person can have for their friends is to give their life for them. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because a servant does not know what the master is doing. Instead, I call you friends, because I have told you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, no, I chose you, and I appointed you to go and to bear much fruit, the kind of fruit that endures. And so the Father will give you whatever you ask of him in my name. This is what I command you: to love one another. The Gospel of the Lord.
Please stand and join in the singing of our national anthem.
Soil and well for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance or stray your fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance or stray your fair. Beneath our radiant southern cross, we'll toil with hearts and hands to make this commonwealth of ours renowned of all the lands. For those who've come across the seas, we've boundless plains to share. With courage let us all combine to advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
God of love and liberty, we bring our thanks for the peace and security that we enjoy, which was won for us through the courage and devotion of those who gave their lives in time of war. We pray that their labour and sacrifice may not be in vain, but that their spirit may live on in us and in generations to come. That the liberty, truth and justice which they sought to preserve may be seen and known in all the nations upon earth. This we pray in the name of the one who gave his life for the sake of the world, Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen. And as we go now, remember the sacrifice that many Australians and New Zealanders made so that we could have freedom. Remember also that we can each promote peace and justice in our world by being aware of our own words and actions. Let us now go in peace.
Thanks be to God.
Please remain standing in silence while the catapult party depart. Catapult party commander, dismount the guard.
Onward, go. Catapult body, quick march. Catapult body. Catapult body, this.
The wreath that was laid during the service will now be placed in front of our memorial plaque and guarded. This monument pays tribute to the saints' old boys who have served their country and have given the ultimate sacrifice. Please be seated. Thank you for the way in which you entered our ANZAC Day service today. Please join me in thanking Lieutenant Danielle Britton, Royal Australian Navy. I would now like to ask Mr. Brennan to present this small gift to you as a sign of our appreciation.
Well, good morning, Reverend Brothers, special guests, parents who've been able to join us today, staff and young men of saints. It's been a great pleasure to stand here this morning and to be part of or to experience such a wonderful ANZAC service this morning. I'd particularly like to thank the many people who were involved in putting this together, and I know it was a particularly challenging assembly for us today with our musical being held down at CPAC tonight, tomorrow and tomorrow evening. So a number of our key people are down there preparing for that, and I know a number of our young men on stage today and people behind the scenes have had a great deal to do with putting this together. But particular thanks to Father Laurie for his work with all of the cadets, with Mr Rigby, for I know he's done a lot behind the scenes also, for Dr Wright, who's the first clip we saw today was something that he put together, and obviously to our old boy and also to Lachlan for putting together that second clip. Whilst I'm on the notion of thanks, can I thank all of the boys and staff particularly who were able to represent the college so well at the dawn service last week. It was, for me, one of the prouder moments, or one of the more proud moments I've had in my short time here, just to see how many students and parents and staff were in a position to be able to get up so early, dressed in uniform, or dressed appropriately as staff, being sure that we were there as a presence. Now, whilst we're never there for recognition, and whilst many people did come and see me, or I know other staff saying it was wonderful to see St Augustine's there, recognition isn't what it's all about, as I've just said. It's more about the respect and the reverence that we paid and the honour that we gave to those fallen. At that service, it was mentioned to us that as of last Thursday, sadly 102,866 Australians have given their life in the service of this country. It's far too many. And when we look at a little bit of historical context, and I know ANZAC, as we said, came from the First World War and the landing of ANZAC Cove, the work of the Australian and the New Zealand Army Corps. In the First World War, 400,000 Australians enlisted to serve their country. 400,000 people in a population of just under 5 million. And if we look at those stats and we put them into 2019, and we look at the numbers that we have here, that's almost 2 million Australians in our population if we look at it in those sort of numbers. And when we look at 2 million people, that's more than the entire state of South Australia. It's 5 times the number of people who live in the ACT. And in fact, it's more than 13 times the population of Cairns put their names down to enlist. It's almost 1 in 10 Australians. So you can imagine the sort of impact that that would have had on our country, and why we as a nation in 2019 can never ever forget. This year's theme for ANZAC Day, and I know there's a slide there, hopefully we can have a look at it if it's there. We're particularly recognising the work of the nurses and the medical corps in our country during war times. Nurses first became part of the war effort for Australia back in 1900 during the Boer War in South Africa. But more than that, then in the First World War, they were a very, very big part of all of the campaigns, and sadly, 20 nurses died during the First World War, with 7 having been awarded the Military Medal for bravery. We move on to the Second World War. 78 nurses lost their lives, and many were imprisoned alongside their male counterparts in Japanese prisoner of war camps, where they may have stayed for up to 3 years. Our nursing corps were also part of the Korean War in the early 1950s, as well as the Vietnam War and many others. It wasn't until 1972 that men were actually enlisted to be part of the nursing corps in this country. So whilst it's very, very important that we always recognise the work our young men did for our country over many years, it's very, very appropriate in 2019 that we recognise the work of our females in this country and all of the work that the women did in obviously not only supporting the men back here at home and the families back here at home, but on those front lines supporting and trying to nurse our men back into battle. And obviously you see with our presence today of Lieutenant Britton, our female Australians are now a part of all levels, of all services, which is highly appropriate. It's been mentioned many times today that we are very fortunate in the country that we live in. And I know I only reflected on this probably 12 months ago, but I had an opportunity when I was in two beautiful countries in the world, in Cambodia and Vietnam. And whilst it's important to recognise what a beautiful country they are, there's beautiful food, we all know that. The people are wonderful, the places to visit are wonderful. They're not a free country. They live in a communist society, and I had an opportunity to spend some time over a few hours with some of the locals, a couple of local men, just reflecting on their lives in comparison to what we take so much for granted. In a communist country there aren't many civil liberties, and one of the things that they spoke about at length with me was how lucky we are to have the opportunity of free speech in this country. We have the opportunity to protest peacefully. And well, not interestingly, but while I was over there, there was a protest where 2 people were killed. Now that never made any media outlets, because the media get shut down, and if there's anything like that, they're not allowed to report it. If there's any sign of protest, all social media in those countries get shut down. And heaven forbid anyone who would speak about that openly outside of the country. And again, it made me reflect just on how lucky we are, and to never take for granted what your forefathers, grandfathers and other members of your family have fought so hard for us to have here in 2019. In closing, it makes me think of a song that was written by the great John Lennon, and a song called Imagine that was written in 1971. So we're going back some 48 years, where he challenged the society at the time to imagine living in a world without war, without killing, without dying, in a world of peace. And I stand here as a person of that generation, having to acknowledge the fact that we, your teachers, your parents, and others, we failed, or we haven't succeeded in that. That we still live in a society where there is war. You've only got to open any page of any newspaper or go to any news to hear that. And despite all of our efforts as a generation and striving for world peace, it's not something we've been able to achieve. And I guess for me, my hope or my prayer, what I wish for, and I guess my challenge to you, the young people of the world, not only the young people of Cairns but across the world, and your own children, at one stage get an opportunity to not only imagine what it would be like in a world without war and a world in peace, but to actually realise that. So in closing again, I'd like to thank Lieutenant Britton for her presence here today. I'd like to thank Father Laurie and his work in getting our cadets together. And finally to you as a wonderful community of St Augustine's for the reverence and the respect that you've shown this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Can I ask our official party to join the cadets out on the deck for morning tea, please?